Hello everyone! Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley. Today we are cooking a kimchi fried rice that uses or relies very heavily on the use of gochujang, which also comes from Korean food. I stumbled on or really threw together this recipe because my favorite way of doing a kimchi fried rice, actually up until pretty recently, was using kimchi brine, which is essentially the brine that kimchi sits in when you buy it in the jar. That brine can be kind of hard to derive though, because sometimes if you make enough kimchi fried rice, you'll eventually run out of brine before you run out of kimchi. So I came up with this alternate method which uses gochujang instead. We're also going to try and get a little bit of kimchi brine out of our kimchi today too. But the use of gochujang kind of makes up for the fact that we won't really be able to get quite as much kimchi brine out of our kimchi as I'd like. So we'll be substituting that with a little bit of gochujang instead too. Gochujang, if you're not familiar with it, it comes from Korean cuisine and is derived from the fermentation of chili peppers. It looks like this. You buy it in a little plastic jar. This one is not open actually. You buy it in a jar that looks like this, and very often it will come in a big tub. And it is very sticky. It's kind of a little bit sweeter, on the sweeter side, so it will look something like that. But also very, very spicy. So anytime that you're using gochujang, you want to use this stuff very, very sparingly. I usually don't use more than maybe 2 tablespoons of it at a time in any given recipe because it is very, very pungent. So if you're not careful, it will absolutely take over your entire recipe if you're not paying attention and you use too much of it. So, as with a lot of recipes, pretty much everything that I do in a wok these days, I'm starting off by crushing and mincing some garlic, followed by some finely minced ginger. So, anytime that we work with garlic, we want to give it a real good smash here. That serves 2 purposes. So the first purpose is that when you smash it, it will open up all of the skin of the garlic. So if you've ever had a lot of trouble peeling garlic, or if you hate peeling garlic, just give it a really good smash and that skin will come right off. The other really great and important thing that smashing your garlic will do is that it releases the allicin, which if you think of garlic, I guess garlic juice, that's what allicin is. So all of the flavor of your garlic, it lives in that allicin. So if you don't crush it, you won't really be able to derive any of that allicin from it. And if you don't get that allicin out, then it's not going to really taste like anything. So if you've ever used garlic that's not crushed, unless you're eating a huge chunk of garlic, you'll probably find that it doesn't really taste like much. It's kind of bland. It doesn't really have any flavor at all. That's because it wasn't crushed properly. And if you don't crush it, the allicin doesn't come out. So I think there's only one real scenario where I ever don't crush my garlic, and it's when I'm trying to make crispy garlic flakes. And that's the real scenario, or the only scenario that I like doing that in, because in that case I'm probably going to be eating very, very large chunks of garlic, and that's the only real scenario where I like doing that. Otherwise though, anytime, especially if you're using that as an aromatic element, give that stuff a real good crush before you throw it in. Charles, how's it going? Wild turkey. No, I haven't had wild turkey in a long time. Not since my college days. Today, this is Templeton rye. No, it's not. It's monkey shoulder. I don't know why I thought. Oh, I guess Templeton rye has a similar bottle. Yeah, today we're drinking monkey shoulder, which is Scotch. It's actually one of my favorite affordable scotches. So I love drinking monkey shoulder whenever I have it on hand, because I don't feel bad about drinking really, really expensive scotch, especially if I have 4 glasses of it. Hermina, how's it going? Yeah, good to see you too. Yeah. Hello to everyone on YouTube. For those following on Reddit, we're also simultaneously streaming over on YouTube as well. That would be the laptop behind me. In addition to all of the recipe videos, so that's where all of the recipe videos that I release live. That's also where the simultaneous stream lives, and that stream also has a whole schedule of everything that I'm going to be cooking in the next couple of days. Probably a couple of weeks now, actually. That's probably out. At least 2 weeks, probably coming up on 3 weeks now at this point. So if you want to find out what I'm going to be cooking next, you can find all of that information over on my YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, that's the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're already on. Good job. Alright, so that's our ginger and garlic. For the ginger, you did notice, or you probably noticed, that I did crush that, and I did actually give it a fine mince. You can't skip the fine mince on a ginger. You absolutely have to do, because ginger is a pretty durable veggie, because it comes from roots. Cool. Next up, I'm going to set aside some kimchi here. So how much kimchi do we need? Alright, so I'm looking for, we don't need a bowl for this, I'm looking for half a cup of kimchi plus a quarter cup of kimchi brine. So this kimchi is not that old, so I'm not expecting to be able to get a quarter cup of kimchi brine out of this. But we're going to try and get as much as we possibly can out of it. Let's see, let's start with our kimchi. Do it. And the older that your kimchi gets, the more that the brine will start shedding, because what's happening is that as it gets older, the cabbage starts releasing some of its juice. So the cabbage starts shedding water, and it starts adding to that brine. And as that brine starts accumulating more cabbage water, it starts becoming a thicker and more, or like a more, you have more of it. But if you have a particularly young kimchi, oh, my mic. Is the mic feeding? Oh boy. Is the mic feeding back? Ooh. Well, that's fun. All right. Yeah, it's like the mic is self-aware. I totally agree with that. Check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2, check, check, check. Check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right. Hopefully that solved it. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I totally agree. It is like the mic is self-aware, and every time people point it out, then I go and check it, and then it's not doing the thing anymore. So, anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, the last thing I'll mention is the reason that we're crowdfunding, or the reason that we're taking donations over on YouTube, is because this stupid mic keeps doing that. So, there is no solution. I don't know how to fix it. I think the real solution is that I probably shouldn't be using a mic pack from the 80s. So, if you want to help us buy a new mic pack, that's what's happening over on YouTube. But anyway, not super important. More importantly, what we're looking for is a quarter cup of kimchi brine, which we have quite a bit of kimchi brine, but I don't think we're going to get a whole quarter cup. That looks like just shy of a quarter cup. That kimchi brine, it is filled with a lot of umami and a lot of flavor, so it is going to be really, really valuable. If you can get a whole quarter cup out of it, that's going to do a lot of favors for your fried rice. If you can get enough kimchi brine, you can actually just leave the gochujang out. I don't think that this is quite enough brine, but what you really get out of it is that it has a lot of like fermented and vinegary flavor to it, so there's a lot of umami that lives in kimchi brine. So I love using it anytime I can get some out. I love using it. Most of the time, I usually don't have enough kimchi brine, unless I have like a particularly old bag of kimchi, which I think is what this is. All right, next up, this is 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and 2 tablespoons of sesame oil. 1 tablespoon of sesame oil, excuse me. And that is, other than our gochujang, all we're really adding here. So usually when I work with gochujang, I like keeping it as simple as possible, and that's because gochujang has a lot of things going on already. So you'll notice all we really used was basically that was pretty much just soy sauce and sesame oil, plus the kimchi brine, and that's really all we're doing other than this gochujang. The gochujang is going to do quite a number of things already. So you actually don't need to do a whole lot outside of this gochujang. Most important though is remember that gochujang, it is very, very pungent, and it has a lot of heat already. So it is a very, very aggressive paste. So if you are working with gochujang, I very rarely will you see me use more than 2 tablespoons of gochujang in any recipe, because it is very, very pungent. Oh, Zapfish, yeah, how's it going? Oh, there's quite a few people over on YouTube. Yeah. Yeah, oh, what is kimchi? Yeah, good question. Kimchi is a fermented cabbage, so it, there's a whole Korean culture behind kimchi. It is a real art form how it's made. I don't really know the intricacies behind how kimchi is made, but essentially what it is it reminds me a little bit of sauerkraut, where it's a fermented cabbage that I believe it's fermented in some kind of fish. I think anchovy. I might be wrong about that. But probably the most important part of kimchi is the gochugaru, which is kind of like Korean chili powder, I guess. I guess that's what it would be. And that's where all of the spiciness and heat from kimchi comes from. But yeah, good question. Very often, if you've ever gotten like Korean food, it will come as like part of the appetizer. And that's like sort of the thing that you eat on the side with everything else that you're eating. So that's our sauce. We'll have her streamed on Twitch. I used to stream on Twitch a little bit more. I haven't streamed on Twitch in a while. Ever since I started streaming on YouTube, I kind of stopped streaming on Twitch. For no real reason other than it just seemed like the YouTube channel was the more obvious place to be. Because that's where all of the recipe videos are already, so I just ended up doing it over on YouTube instead. But yeah, but there is a Twitch channel somewhere on the internet on Twitch. There's a Wukang Cook Twitch channel, but I don't use it that much. So, all right. So next up, I'm going to dice up, actually, not slice, some bacon here. So what we're using today is some thick cut bacon. Which I'm actually going to be chopping fairly large because we want pretty large bits of bacon here. What I think most important about the use of bacon in this is actually not the bacon, or like the bits of bacon meat. What we're looking for is this large bit of bacon fat. So all of this white stuff. That's going to be by far the most important part of this bacon because we're going to render that out, and that's where all of the flavor is going to come from. So. All of the bacon flavor that we're looking for is going to derive from this rendered bacon fat. So, more important than the actual bacon bits that we're going to get out of it is going to be this bacon fat. And that's actually the reason why anytime that you see me working with bacon, you'll probably see me working with thick cut bacon like this, because thick cut bacon has a lot more fat to render out than thin cut bacon. Thin cut bacon being more like along the lines of what you would find if you were making bacon for breakfast. Would be like thin cut bacon. Okay, so that's what we're baking. All right, there we go. I think that's it. Yeah, cool. All right. Clean up some bacon here. So the last thing, actually probably what we wanted to do before we chop that bacon, but we're going to get to it because I forgot, are some green onions, which are going to be the very last thing that we want to do. The reason that I say is that you probably want to chop these before you do your bacon is because ideally you don't want to have to wash your board in between. So that's the reason that why I just very thoroughly washed our cutting board, is because we just had bacon fat on our cutting board. So if you're really diligent, what you should be doing is chopping these before you get to the bacon, but I forgot, so here we are. So what we're going to be doing, and this is probably something, if you've watched one of these streams before, it's probably something that you've seen me do many, many times, which is we're going to separate the whites and the greens of our green onions. We're going to chop our whites for use as our aromatics, and then the greens are going to come in very late as our garnish at the very, very end. So for our whites, because they're going to go in with the aromatics, we want these chopped fairly large so that they hold up in the wok fry. If you chop them too small, they'll literally just disappear in the wok fry, which is not good. So that's the whites of our green onions. So we're going to set these aside. They're going to go in with our aromatics. So this is the whites, that's our ginger, and that's our garlic. These are our three main aromatic elements. And finally, the greens of our green onions will go in last. And these we want to slice on a large bias. We want these to take up as much physical space as we possibly can because they are going to be going in as a garnish. So since they're actually not going to be cooked, we want them to take up quite a bit of physical space. Otherwise, you're not really going to be able to taste it because it's going to be raw. So I'm slicing these on a bias, which basically means we're cutting it on a diagonal so that it has a larger physical presence to it. And then we're going to set these aside. These are going to be the very last thing that we put on our kimchi or on our fried rice. And that should do it. Cool. Yeah. All right. I think that's it for cutting. So over on the stove, that's the wrong pan. So I have two pans that are set up on my stove. Actually, we can talk about this right now. The first pan is probably the pan that you probably have seen me cook on the most. This is my carbon steel wok. But we're not actually going to start on this first. What we're going to start on is a cast iron pan. So I'm going to pop over and switch this out for my cast iron pan. This is a cast iron, I think 10-inch skillet maybe. And this is going to be super, super useful for rendering out bacon fats. We want to start in this cast iron pan first so that we can render out as much fat as possible. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth between these two pans for two different purposes. So the cast iron pan, when we start working with bacon, is going to be really, really useful because we'll be able to render out all of this bacon fat. So we're going to be able to turn it into a liquid form a lot easier than if we were cooking in a wok. And that's because woks have poor heat retention. So as we start bringing this cast iron pan up to heat, all of that white bit of bacon fat is going to start rendering out into liquid form. If we tried to do that in a wok, it would pretty much just burn because a wok would come up to temperature way too fast. So instead, we're going to do it in a cast iron pan, then we're going to render out all of that fat, and then remove our bacon solids and then start cooking in our wok from there. So we're going to transfer our bacon fat over to our wok, and we're going to start cooking in the wok from there. So, but super, super important since we're working with bacon and we want to render out some fat, that we start it in the cast iron pan first. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to render out that fat. So I'm starting it in my cast iron pan. Right now it is ice cold, so my cast iron pan is literally cold to the touch. I can actually touch it because it is not hot at all. So we're going to bring that up to temperature with the bacon in it, and that's going to turn those fatty solids in the bacon into a liquid form. And that will take probably about 5 minutes or so. Cool. All right. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. With new recipes, those are coming out every Friday, so if you haven't caught one of these streams before, we've got new stuff. Those come out every Friday, so the last Friday last week was Japanese white miso curry that came out Friday. This coming Friday, so in 2 days, will be Taiwanese popcorn chicken, which I'm super stoked for. Lots of fun recipes coming up every Friday. There's the Taiwanese popcorn chicken, at least that one is coming from our Chinese American food hacks series, where we've been like deconstructing a lot of foods that are really popular in Chinese American cuisine. So a lot of times the stuff from that series ends up being things like Panda Express, PF Chang's. The Taiwanese popcorn chicken is coming from Quickly, which is a really popular boba and snack shop place here in the States. Stuff like that. What I like doing is deconstructing those things and kind of taking a look at what are the American elements of Chinese American food, and taking a look at what it would look like if we removed all of those American things and reassembled it in the tradition of like traditional Chinese wok cooking. So sort of like taking an understanding of how traditional Chinese wok cooking works and applying it to things that are very Americanized in Chinese American cuisine. So things like General Tso's chicken and Kung Pao chicken. We did the Panda Express Beijing beef, which was super fun. So stuff like that, always really interesting because it's interesting to take a look at what the foods that I've been eating since I was a kid would look like if it wasn't so Americanized. So, if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel where all of that stuff lives. Those recipes, those come up every Friday. Yeah, we've been doing new recipes every Friday for probably coming up on a year now, which has been crazy. It's a lot of food. I think there's coming up on 50 recipes, about 50 recipes or so that's coming up on now. So pretty much everything that I cook on stream has a recipe video that goes along with it. So this kimchi fried rice has a recipe that I think I did this recipe back in like August or September or so. It was a while ago. And that already lives over on the YouTube channel. So if you're trying to figure out what I'm cooking or how to cook what I'm cooking, that recipe, it already lives over on YouTube. All right, so we're keeping a close eye on our bacon here. You'll notice that the solid fats of my bacon are slowly and gradually rendering into liquid form. So at the bottom of my pan, you'll notice that there's some liquid bacon fat rendering here. That's going to probably render maybe 5 times as much fat, and it will start giving us a fatty liquid that we can start cooking in, and that's going to be where all of our flavor is going to come from. Now, can you cook human meat? Yeah, so what I've heard actually is that human meat is probably most similar to bacon because humans are very fatty in the same way that pigs are. But no, I've never cooked human meat. That would be weird. But I would be willing to bet that humans are probably pretty tasty because we probably taste like bacon. Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, that's just an objective observation. I don't know if anyone here, probably there are people on Reddit that eat humans. Probably shouldn't talk about that. Anyway, so we're looking for all of this fat to start rendering. I'd say we have another like 2 or 3 minutes before this is done. As the cast iron pan starts getting hotter, it will start rendering out more bacon fat. So we're really just waiting for our bacon or our cast iron pan to come up to temperature. But because cast iron pans heat up so slowly because they're so thick, it regulates that heat on its own. So we actually don't need to do much to it. Pretty much just need to turn the pan on and then let it render out on its own. You're shook, yeah. How different is bacon in America to Taiwan? Oh, yeah. Yeah, Johnny, that's a great question. I have not had a lot of bacon in Taiwan. But from what I have found, I think, as far as I've discovered, the bacon, in general in most like Asian areas, so like this includes like Taiwanese street food, but also Korean street food, Singaporean street food, all of the bacon that I've seen in that kind of street food, it seems to be a lot thinner. Most of the time I see them using thinner cut bacon, and very often I will see them most of the time it ends up kind of like steaming in its own fat when I see it cooked on street foods. And I have a hunch as to why that might be. I'm thinking maybe because when you're watching them cooking, on the street, their griddle is already very, very hot, so they're putting bacon onto a hot griddle, and what's happening is instead of rendering bacon fat, it's going to start burning. So very, very often when I watch like Taiwanese street food or Singaporean street food cooking bacon, it kind of looks like a little bit like grayish, and for the most part, it kind of looks like undercooked. A lot of times when I see bacon served on Taiwanese street food, it pretty much just looks raw. It just does not look attractive at all. And I have a feeling that's because the griddle is already very, very hot. So maybe that's just the quality of street food. But yeah, for sure, I don't think I've seen or come across like thick cut bacon in any kind of Taiwanese street food. For sure. Oh yeah, Hermita, how old is my cast iron pan? It is probably coming up on 2 years old. It has, I think I've had this pan longer than I've had my wok for sure. So it's coming up on 2 years at least. And it has a really solid seasoning to it. That's like also really, really important to a cast iron pan. So just like a wok, super, super important for your cast iron. Those things have to be seasoned really, really well. Otherwise, they're just going to start sticking. So same as with my wok. When I first got this cast iron pan, everything stuck to it for like the first like 5 cooks. Like everything was sticking to it, and it was super, super frustrating. But I just stuck with it and used it a lot. And now I can fry eggs on it and stuff. So. Ooh, Joaquin, yeah, anything, suggestions for anything other than bacon? Anything fatty. I would say is if you're not using bacon, the next thing that I would substitute is chicken thigh. I would probably use chicken thigh because it would have quite a bit of fat that we could render out. And then I would probably miss the bacon fat though. If you're trying to keep it like intentionally keep it vegetarian, then that gets tricky. We're really looking for that bacon fat. So I guess you could probably leave it out and it would probably be okay. But then again, if you're making kimchi fried rice, kimchi already is not vegetarian either. So yeah, but really anything that has a lot of fat to it, as long as it has high fat content, we'll be able to derive enough fat from it to start building out our crispy fried rice. All right, so what I'm doing right now is I'm removing all of the solids, all of my bacon solids here. We don't want to keep any of this in the pan because if it stays in the pan while we cook the rest of our ingredients, it's going to start burning. Then we're going to have burnt bacon bits. So right now our bacon is right at the point where if we could eat this right now, it is perfectly cooked. If we leave it behind at all, it's going to start burning, so that's not going to be good. Cool. So next up, I'm switching back over to my wok here. So finally, we're getting to some wok cooking. And what we're going to do is we're going to start cooking. We're going to reheat our wok, and then we're going to basically from here on out, it's pretty much similar to any other wok fry. So we're going to start with our aromatics. Then we're going to add that bacon fat. Then we're going to add our kimchi and our rice, and then we're going to sear everything. And then we're going to put everything back into the cast iron pan and then sear it one final time. And that's how we get a crispy fried rice. But before we can do that, though, we want this wok to be ripping hot, so I'm going to give it a good amount of time to heat up first. This will probably take maybe a minute, maybe a little bit longer than that. We want this thing very, very hot before we start cooking, though. Oh yeah, MSG. Yeah, Crooked Box is a good question. Yeah, sometimes I do cook with MSG, but most often I skip the use of MSG because MSG exists in a lot of the other ingredients that I'm using already. So today, there's definitely MSG in the soy sauce that we used, and I haven't actually looked, but I would be willing to bet that there's MSG in the gochujang that we used too. Pretty much anywhere that you derive like umami or fermented flavors, it probably has some amount of MSG in it already. Unless it explicitly says it does not contain MSG. They're probably using a little bit of MSG in it. So since like many of the things that we're already using have MSG in it, I usually just end up skipping it because I find that I don't really need to use it. But that's absolutely right, though. You definitely cannot make fried rice without the use of MSG. You can't make any kind of Chinese food without MSG. It's kind of like the most important ingredient to all Chinese food, really. So yeah, good question. You can't replace bacon. That nothing else compares. Yeah, it's tough. Bacon is a really tough one to substitute out. I would say maybe like the best thing that I can think of in replacement of bacon would be ground pork. But I would assume if you're trying to avoid bacon, you probably can't eat ground pork either. So. Health-wise, it's questionable. Yeah, that's actually true. MSG is well. Those are both kind of true. So health-wise, MSG is questionable, but also everything that you've heard about MSG is pretty much a myth. It is definitely bad for you. That's not like avoid confusion about that. MSG is definitely bad for you. It is very, very salty. It has very, very high sodium. It's the same reason that Chinese food is so bad for you. It's because it contains so much MSG, which basically essentially meaning that it just contains a lot of salt and sodium. So just like anything else is bad for you, MSG is totally bad for you. Soy sauce is really bad for you. Probably most of the things that we're cooking is bad for you. So that there's no confusion about that. MSG is definitely bad for you. But in my opinion, I don't think it's worse for you than most other things that you cook with. It's certainly not worse for you than bacon fat. Like if you're making bacon fried rice, you're already adding a lot of bad stuff to your body. So yeah, good question though. Cool. So we're looking for a very, very hot wok. You will know when your wok is hot when you start seeing a lot of smoke billowing off the ice. We have a little bit of smoke, but we're waiting for a lot of smoke. Once you start seeing all of that smoke coming off, that's a sign that your wok is very, very hot. You absolutely do not want to start cooking on it until you start seeing all of that smoke coming up. Because if it is not hot enough, then you're going to end up with a mushy fried rice. So, in the realm of cooking fried rice, low temperatures and mushy fried rice is the biggest enemy of what you're cooking. So if you've ever had a fried rice and it's almost more of a porridgey consistency, that's why. It's because the wok wasn't hot enough. So especially in home cooking, it's one of the biggest pitfalls of home cooking because your home range doesn't go as hot as your restaurant range. So very, very often, unless you navigate the wok correctly, you're going to end up with a mushy fried rice. So we have to navigate our heat retention very carefully here because we're about to add a whole bunch of stuff to the wok. So we're going to get through all of that just today. All right, so I'm starting off. This is 4 tablespoons of peanut oil. And then we're going to do our long yao. So this comes from Chinese cooking, which is essentially adding cold oil to a hot wok and giving it a swirl, and that creates our non-stick surface. All right, then I'm starting off. This is my garlic going in first. And the ginger. And finally the whites of my green onions. And then we're going to let these go for just long enough until it's fragrant. That's usually about 10 seconds for me, maybe a little bit longer. But use your nose at this point. When you start smelling garlic and ginger, that's when you know you're ready to go. All right, next up, I'm following this up with my kimchi. And I'm just cooking off a little bit of that moisture. I don't want quite as much of that soggy moisture from our kimchi here. And now we're adding our rice next. So very, very important. I probably shouldn't mention this earlier. But anytime that you're making fried rice, you want to be using leftover rice. So you can tell that my rice is very, very stale. That's why it is in such large clumps like this is because it is very, very stale rice. So I literally left this rice out for almost a full 24 hours. This has been sitting out since yesterday's stream, basically. So we made... What did we cook on stream yesterday? What did I cook on stream yesterday? I don't remember what I ate. But we made a stir fry yesterday. Oh yeah, I know what we did. We did... oh yeah, we did Japanese curry yesterday. So this is the leftover rice from yesterday's stream. So super, super important. You cannot make fried rice with fresh rice. It has to be dried and leftover rice. So it has to be stale rice. Otherwise, you're going to be introducing a lot of moisture to the wok if you're using fresh rice. And moisture, as I mentioned earlier, is the biggest enemy of fried rice. So we're trying to reduce as much moisture in this wok as possible. So that's why our wok has to be using, or our fried rice has to be using day-old rice. Yeah, I made Delaware Smash. Thank you. I made the curry yesterday. Thank you for the reminder. I'm very bad at remembering what I cooked yesterday. Yeah. All right. So I'm adding just a little bit more rice here. And as you can see, the wok, my rice is still pretty clumpy. That's okay because we're about to add our sauce next. But very, very important, we want that to be relatively dry. All right. Good. I'm adding my bacon back to the wok next, followed by our sauce mixture. And anytime I work with sauces, I like to reserve the last maybe quarter cup or so. So that's going to help us make sure that we don't over-season. So if it needs it, we can add the remaining. But if it doesn't need it, don't feel bad about throwing it out. All right. Cool. All right, so the last thing that we want to do... All right, so actually we can talk about this for a second. So the biggest problem, the reason that we can't finish this in a carbon steel wok, so you can listen and hear it even, is because all of the heat is gone from my wok, so you can hear it right now. There's not a lot of sizzling happening, and that's because there's so much stuff in the wok right now. I'm actually going to finish off this rice and add the rest. So this is super, super important to pay attention to. If you ever notice that your wok is not sizzling in the way that it is not sizzling right now, and you're still cooking stuff, that's a sign that you're on your way to a mushy fried rice. So if we tried to finish this fried rice in this wok right now, what we would end up with, it would probably be mostly okay, but it would probably be a little bit mushy. So what I have started doing, and I love doing this, is switching back over to our cast iron pan. And we're going to finish our fried rice in the cast iron pan. And that is going to give us that crispy, like seared quality to our fried rice. So I'm adding my fried rice, or my finished fried rice, back over to my cast iron pan where I have all of my bacon fat rendered. We're going to let this sit in our cast iron pan this needs to go for a full 3 minutes. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just making sure that as much of the fried rice is making solid contact with the bottom of my cast iron pan as possible, because that's going to yield us as much of crispy fried rice as we can possibly get. And basically every part of the fried rice that's making contact with that cast iron pan right now is going to give us something crispy. So what we need to do at this point is let it sit and don't touch it for a full 3 minutes. So super, super important. when you're trying to sear stuff. This is also true for things like ribeye steaks or New York strip steaks, pork chops, anything that you're searing. Is in order for it to sear, you have to not touch it. So if you fuss with it, if you move it around, if you get antsy and you start checking it, that's when you're going to start messing up that sear. So you don't want to touch it. You're going to start thinking right around like 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes, you're going to start wondering if it's burning, because that's essentially what a sear is a burn. But I promise you, it's going to be okay. Don't touch it. Cool. Yeah, oh, lots of comments. Oh, sleep by the tower. Yeah, yeah, good question. Yeah, the flame of of my stove is not very hot. There's nothing fancy about my stovetop. It's a pretty standard gas stove. What I am using, I'm using the hottest burner, so I'm not on my simmer burner. I have never tried wok cooking on my simmer burner, but I would guess that it would not go well because I wouldn't be able to get the wok hot enough. But there's nothing fancy about it. It's just a standard gas burner. What am I drinking? Yeah, today we're drinking a Monkey Shoulder, which is like a cheap and affordable Scotch, single malt, I believe, Highland single malt, I think, and you can get a bottle of it here in the States, $35 or something like that. Exploring the unseen. Oh, you tried what I showed you yesterday. That's awesome. Yeah, cool. Probably the curry. Yeah, the Japanese curry is one of my favorites. Glad you tried it. That's one of my favorites for sure. What's in the sauce? Yeah, so in today's sauce, we're using, that's a combination of kimchi brine, soy sauce, sesame oil, and gochujang. So if you're looking for the written recipe, that all lives over on the YouTube channel. So probably should be a link in this. Anyway, recipe. All right, so over on the YouTube channel, there's a video that goes along. There's a recipe that goes along with pretty much everything that I cook. In that recipe video, it has all of the quantities and the ingredients, and it kind of moves a little bit slower. We talk our way through all of the decision making and stuff. So if you're trying to figure out what I'm cooking, or if you have all of the ingredients that you need to cook what I'm cooking, that all lives over on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, that's the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're already on. Right, so we're at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, which for me is right around when I start getting antsy. But I'm not going to touch it. Yeah, that's good. So you'll notice as soon as I start agitating it, at the bottom, everything that was touching the cast iron pan has started searing. So you see all of this nice crispy rice going at the bottom of the pan. That's probably the most important part of our fried rice today, is all of that crispy rice. So it's going to give us a nice bit of texture in that sear. So if you wanted to, you probably could cook this entire dish on this cast iron pan, which I have done before actually. All right. Nope. It's not from things. So remember that a cast iron pan, because it is so thick, retains heat very, very well. So even when you pull it off of the fire, even if you turn the fire off, it's going to continue cooking. Unlike a wok, where if you kill the heat, it will pretty much stop cooking because the wok has poor heat retention. In a cast iron pan, it will continue to cook for at least 5 minutes, so super, super important. When you're working in cast iron pans, when the thing that you're cooking is done, pull it out. It has to come out of the pan. Otherwise, it will absolutely residual cook, and then you're going to end up with overcooked fried rice, which is not what we're after. So, really quick before we move on and finish up our rice, I'm going to take a look here. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. So these are the bits that we're looking for here. All of this nice crisp fried rice. That's where all of the texture of our fried rice is going to come from.
It's probably clear on YouTube because we have this next one.
But all right, so that's it for our cast iron pan, which means that we're ready to clean it up. Actually, we could probably walk through how to clean your cast iron pan. So just like with our wok, the last thing that we want to do in any time that we use a cast iron pan is clean it. Super, super important. While your cast iron pan is hot, this is especially true for cast iron pans because they have such high heat retention, you will still have this nice non-stick surface, so everything is just coming right off when I go rinse it. I didn't do any scrubbing. All I did was give it a rinse. And all of my debris just comes right off. So super, super useful to know because we don't ever want to leave stuff sitting in a cast iron pan. Otherwise, it's going to start searing to the bottom of the pan, and then you're going to have a real big problem with cleaning it afterwards. So do yourself a favor and clean and season your cast iron pans immediately after cooking it while it is still hot. So I'm just adding, this is a little bit of peanut oil, and we're coating all sides of the pan. And just like with our wok, this is going to prevent any kind of carbonizing or any kind of rust.
Cool.
Ooh, yeah, that's real good. All right, so the last thing that we're going to do are a couple of fried eggs, which is like probably the quintessential thing to finish a Korean fried rice with is fried egg. And then we're going to be ready to eat. Yeah, Big Meat Choo Choo, thank you, yeah. This is one of my favorite fried rices for sure. While the wok's heating up, we can take a look at our fried rice. Have I tried making orange beef? I didn't know that orange beef is a thing. Orange chicken is on my to-do list. I'm very intimidated by it. Orange chicken is probably like the most iconic thing that comes from Panda Express. So we have done in the Chinese American Food Hack series pretty much everything else in the Panda Express menu. So we did their Kung Pao chicken, we did the Beijing beef, we did honey sesame chicken, we did General Tso's chicken. I have broccoli beef that's coming up soon. I did Mongolian beef that's came out a couple weeks ago. Mushu pork, pretty much everything else that lives in that menu. The only thing that I haven't attempted yet is orange chicken. Maybe one of the, not the only thing, but one of the only things that I haven't attempted yet. Because it's like probably the most iconic thing from the Panda Express menu. So I really, really, really don't want to mess it up, basically. But yeah, good question. I will probably. I have not heard of orange beef though. That sounds really interesting. Nothing fancy about a gas burner. You could totally wok cook on a propane stove if it has enough BTUs. And like most camping stoves, most camping propane stoves have quite a bit of heat that come off of it because it's literally just a propane canister that's shooting flame out. So those things generally get pretty hot. So I have definitely seen people wok cook on a camping propane stove. So don't knock it. Yeah, you can totally cook on that stuff. If I ever live in a place that has an induction top, that's probably how I would wok cook, is just on the camping stove. Yeah. Charles, am I going to continue cooking shows once the band starts up? Yeah, totally. I have no intention of stopping the cooking shows. These are fun. I love cooking stuff. And it's not like I'm going to stop eating dinner, so. Yeah. Cool. All right, back over on the stove. Our wok is preheating. This is looking pretty hot. And we're going to do our fried eggs next. So, fried egg, it looks just like, well, this needs to be rinsed first. Forgot to clean this. So, don't do what I did. Clean your wok before you finish. But hopefully, if you've done your seasoning right and you forget, stuff should come right off. But generally speaking, though, bad wok care. Make sure that you clean your wok when you're finished. for the same reason that we clean the cast iron. Stuff will start sticking to it otherwise. Alright, so what I'm doing right now is I'm just trying to get all of the debris off of my wok here, so we don't want any of that stuff behind. So you can see there's lots of stuff that's sticking behind on the wok. All of that stuff, we don't want it laying behind because it will get into the fried eggs when we try and cook it. And then we're going to end up with like burnt, crispy stuff in the wok. Alright, so I'm going to let that reheat one more time and then we're going to be ready to cook. Yeah, good question. Yeah, your dear old Meemaw, good one. Where did I get the wok? I got it at a restaurant supply store. So if you're here, I am in Cali. If you're in Oakland, there's a good spot in Oakland Chinatown called Chenko. They have basically they're selling like restaurant supply stuff for the restaurants in Chinatown, Oakland Chinatown. So I got mine. It was like $10. They're priced pretty cheap for bulk sale. Because they're selling to like the restaurants, and those restaurants probably have like 10 of these in the back. So it was really cheap. I think it was only like $10. The real magic behind a wok like this is just about using it and making sure that it has a good seasoning. When I bought it at first, it was a terrible wok because everything was sticking to it. But after maybe 10 or so uses, it started really cooking. If you don't live in Oakland or near an Oakland Chinatown, pretty much anywhere that has a Chinatown district will have a similar restaurant supply store because it will be the restaurant supply store that supplies to the restaurants in Chinatown. So anywhere that you find a lot of Chinese restaurants, there's bound to be some kind of restaurant supply store because that's where those restaurants get all of their cookware and like dinnerware, all of their silverware, the chopsticks, anything that's like in bulk quantity for like Chinese cooking, so including the woks. You'll probably find it at some restaurant supply store that's nearby. New York, no, not New York. Yeah, I live in Oakland. Is peanut oil the best for frying? Yeah, peanut oil is generally accepted as like the most common oil to use for wok cooking. I'm only using it today because I have quite a bit of it. Most commonly, you'll probably see me cooking with grapeseed oil. Although I'm kind of leaning towards peanut oil right now. Peanut oil. So I say this all the time, but peanut oil, it is not a neutral oil. So if you do a lot of wok cooking, which I do a lot of wok cooking, it will make sense to have peanut oil on hand because you'll use it anytime that you wok cook. It's going to be really good for wok cooking. But the main problem with peanut oil is that because it's not neutral, it's not going to be very good for other things. So if you are like frying eggs, so I'm actually going to fry some eggs. I'm going to use some grapeseed oil right now. Or if you're like making hash browns, or if you're cooking breakfast, if you're making anything that's you don't want to do in a wok. It's not going to be great to use peanut oil because peanut oil is not neutral. So if you use it for other purposes, it's going to make stuff taste like peanut. So what I always say is if you're going to have one kind of oil in the house, it should be something high heat and neutral, so probably canola or vegetable oil. Grapeseed oil is usually what I have on hand. If you're going to have a second kind of oil, the second oil I would usually keep on hand is probably olive oil, which is going to be good for things like Italian food. And the third thing, if you're going to have a third oil, would be peanut oil. So that's my third oil right now is peanut oil. Yeah. Cool. Let's see, how do we want to do this? Let's plate this up first. All right, before we start cooking, I'm going to start plating this up so we have somewhere to land. So the last thing that we're going to do right before we start eating this fried rice is fry up a couple of eggs. So that's kind of like the quintessential thing to do anytime that you make fried rice, especially in Korean food, is fry a couple of over easy eggs on it, and then we're going to be ready to eat. But since we have a wok out already, going to be super great to do it in a wok because then we can do a wok fried egg, which is my favorite kind of fried egg. So zinc finger sesame oil. I have. I have tried on occasion to cook with sesame oil. The main problem with sesame oil is that it's very, very expensive. I think the sesame oil that I buy is, I think it's like $8 for like 12 ounces or something like that. It's mostly a finishing oil, so unless you have like Toasted, it's like untoasted sesame oil. It's going to be really, really expensive, so cooking with it might be a little bit impractical because it's going to be so expensive. But as far as I know, pretty good high heat oil. Yeah, avocado oil, also a really good one. Avocado is very neutral. Avocado oil is very neutral, so you can totally cook with that too. Anything that's rated for high heat will work, for sure. My favorite so far, as far as I've found, is grapeseed oil. Because you can find it in pretty high quantity. I think I buy it in like 32 ounces for like $10 at the grocery store, and you can it stays pretty neutral. It doesn't burn at high heat like olive oil will. I've even found that like cheap canola oil starts burning at high heat. So if you use canola oil that's too cheap, it will eventually start burning when the wok gets too hot. So I love grapeseed oil, but peanut oil has been working really, really well too. So. And I also happen to live in Chinatown, so I can get quick access to it. So that's another good one. Cool. All right, let's fry some eggs. All right, so what we're going to do is a wok fried egg here. So, and actually, we could probably do this on peanut oil. I'll let that reheat because I turned the fire down. Hello to everyone just joining. I'm going to reintroduce myself one more time before we fry up these eggs. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. We're streaming here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. PST. If this is your first time catching one of these, pretty much everything that I cook on stream, it has a recipe video that goes along with it. Most of the time that I'm cooking live, I'm probably cooking one of the recipes that I released. So this kimchi fried rice was a recipe that I did for the gift recipe subreddit actually a while ago. That was back in like August or something. So that all lives over on my YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen, that's where all of the recipes live. So if you're trying to reproduce the things that I'm cooking, that's a good place to go. Lots of fun content over there, including all of the recipes for everything that I've ever cooked, probably. That's over on the YouTube channel. So right now we're finishing up our kimchi fried rice. The very last thing that we're going to do is fry up a couple of wok fried eggs over easy. And then we're going to finish it up, and we should be ready to eat. Alright, so I'm going to do my long yao one more time. This is a pretty small quantity of oil here because we're going to go oil. Actually, we probably need a little bit more oil than that. We want like 3 tablespoons of oil. Not quite as much as you would normally use for a like full-blown wok stir fry, but we want oil here so that we can Alright, so probably the most advantageous part of having a round bottom wok is that when you cook in a round bottom wok, all of the oil, it has a tendency to pool up at the bottom where the round bottom kind of ends. So that's super, super useful in this case because it kind of creates this nice pool of oil for our fried egg to cook in. So that's going to give us all of these real lacy egg edges. So you'll notice that my egg, I'm not really even doing much to it. Pretty much everything is sort of just happening thanks to the large pool of oil. All right. So let's do 3 more. So it takes a little bit longer, but I love doing these one at a time because it takes more advantage of that nice pool of oil that's coming up at the bottom of my round bottom wok. If you're really short on time or if you're really in a hurry, you could probably do 2 at a time. But I love a nice wok fried egg. Your dear old Meemaw. Yeah, they are my beats, yeah. So all of the beats, pretty much everything that you hear, all of the music that you hear on pretty much anything that is associated with Woo Can Cook. It's released over on the Woo Cooks Beats channel, which is a sister channel to this sub. So I could probably link that too. But yes, I did write all of them. Yeah, but yeah, that's if you're watching on Reddit, that's also at the bottom of the screen too. So there it is. Yeah, Sarah, crispy edges on soft egg yolks. That's like my favorite way of doing a fried egg is like a lacy fried egg, which comes anytime that you fry an egg over really, really high heat, which is essentially what a wok fried egg is. Very, very high heat with a lot of oil. And what happens is all of the edges of that fried egg are going to start crisping up really, really quickly. If we were doing it in like a skillet, or like a small saucepan, what we would be doing is like spooning oil on top of the egg, and that's going to give us that lacy edge. But what's really, really useful about a round bottom wok is that you actually don't need to do that because the oil is pulling up at the bottom of the wok already. So I don't have to do much, pretty much just letting the oil do the work for me, and everything just sort of coats on its own. But yeah, definitely when I do the same thing in like a non-stick skillet, usually what I'll do is I'll get a tablespoon out and I'll start spooning oil on top of it, and that hot oil starts doing the cook work for me. So just like with a cast iron pan, you know that your wok has a good seasoning when you can do that on it. Need a little bit more oil. All right. So I just added a little bit more oil, so I'm going to let this reheat before we start cooking again. Yeah, who gets the little bowl? Yeah, the little plate is for me, and then the rest of it pretty much just gets shipped off to my brother. My brother just had a baby, so he gets all of my leftovers. Cool. Yeah. All right, so here's our last egg. And I'm just adding, that's a pinch of kosher salt to give it a little bit of flavor. And that should do it. All right. So what I love doing on over easy eggs, or especially sunny side up eggs, is leaving it a little bit undercooked. So you could kind of tell some of the contrast is blowing this out. But on the top next to the yolks, some of the egg white is not set. And I love leaving it that way because some of the residual cook on our wok time is going to do the rest of that cook for me. So as I leave it sitting, it will finish cooking on its own. If we were to try and like finish cooking it in the wok, it would probably end up being overcooked. And then we're gonna have like an over medium egg, or like a sunny side up with like a medium finish on the top, which is also gonna be fine. But I love leaving, anytime that I'm topping fried rice with eggs, I love leaving it extremely runny because then all of the yolk will run off into it. Right. So just like with our cast iron pan, the last thing that we're doing is giving our wok a rinse, making sure that nothing sticks to it, so super, super important. Proper wok care, make sure that you clean this thing before you leave and start eating dinner, because if you leave anything in the wok, it's probably going to stick to it. And then you're going to have a lot more trouble trying to clean a cold wok. So while the wok is hot, before it cools down, do yourself a favor, clean it and then season it so that the next time that you come and cook, it's ready to go already. That'll do it. So I'm finishing this off with a little bit of furikake, which actually I believe comes from Japanese cooking. Furikake is a combination of a few things. It's mostly nori, so dried seaweed. Plus, I believe it has a couple of other things in it. Nori, but the main things are nori and sesame seed in it. And also just generally a really, really good topper for any kind of fried rice, or especially any kind of fried egg. It's nori. And then lastly is our green onions, and that'll do it. Nightshade, is kimchi Korean? Yes, kimchi comes from Korean food. It's probably like one of the more iconic things that come from Korean food. Although fried rice is definitely not Korean. Fried rice comes from Chinese cuisine, so you would probably consider this like, I guess like Korean Chinese fusion, something like that. So, how do I prevent the oil from spilling everywhere when you put the veggies and stuff in? Are you referring to like splatter? I think you might be referring to splatter. A lot of that has to do with making sure that it's like real dry. So if you have, so like a lot of the oil splatter that you're associating with like when you throw in veggies, what it's coming from, it's not actually the veggies hitting the wok. It's actually not even oil that's spitting off. Actually, it's probably mostly oil. But what causes it is when there's a lot of moisture. So usually with veggies, the reason that it has a lot of moisture is probably because you washed it. So very often that happens to me a lot if I'm like working with broccoli. That happens a lot because I like wash broccoli really thoroughly, or bean sprouts, anything that I've washed really thoroughly. Cabbage, that's another good one. All things that I've washed, like really scrubbed down in the sink. And the reason that it has a lot of water is because I scrubbed it down in the sink, so it's filled with all of the water that I was washing it with. On camera. So that means that if you throw it into the wok and it's not properly dried yet, you're introducing a whole bunch of water, like cold water, to very, very hot oil. And what will happen is the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to splatter, and it's going to spit a lot of oil up. And then the second thing that will probably happen is the thing that people associate with like really fancy wok cooking, which is the flame up. So like hot oil meeting cold water causes a flame up, and that's when you start seeing like fire spitting off. So when you see that happening in wok cooking, it's actually not a good thing. It means that you didn't prep your veggies properly. So if you see that happening, it looks really fancy, but it's actually a bad thing. When you see that happen, it means that you didn't get enough water off of your veggies. So it happens to me with potatoes a lot too, because potatoes are coated in starch, so we're soaking them in water a lot. Anytime that it has a lot of water. So yeah, so to answer your question, how to prevent all of this spilling and the oil spitting, is just make sure stuff is dried properly, and it probably won't spit nearly as much. It will definitely still spit. You're going to get oil spitting everywhere. That's basically part of what wok cooking is. It just means that you have to clean it more thoroughly. Yeah, Delaware Smash, good question. So do I turn the stove off? Yeah, so when we're cleaning the wok, same thing with the cast iron pans. We want to do that over heat. So very, very important is we want, after we rinse off the wok, this is especially true for woks actually, because woks have poor heat retention. So after we rinse the wok off, what will happen is the wok is going to cool down very, very rapidly. So it will lose all of its heat as soon as we cool it off, which means two things. First thing is that once you rinse it off, it's probably pretty much clean. So if you've done your seasoning properly, you probably got almost everything off. Usually when I rinse off my wok, probably about 80 to 85% of everything comes off. So unless I burn something, everything comes right off. But the next thing that we need to do is also season it. So when we season the wok, that has to be done while the wok is hot, which means that if we just rinsed it, the wok is probably not hot enough to season. So in order for it to accept that seasoning, we need to reheat the wok over fire and then coat it in oil while it's hot. So I'm reheating it and then coating it in oil. And then once everything is coated in oil, then we can shut it off and put it in storage. Same thing is going to be true for your cast iron pans, but it's a little bit less urgent because cast irons have more heat retention. With a really thin wok like this carbon steel though, if we remove it from the heat, rinse it off, and then try and season it, the wok is going to be cold by the time that we try and season it. So it has to be back over flame in order to make sure that we can season it properly. Good question though. Yeah, how do I make rice so that it's not sticky and lumpy on consumption? Yeah, basmati definitely has a quality where it's not it doesn't really lump up. But yeah, actually, I saw someone mention Uncle Roger.
That's actually what he was talking about in that video. So the really famous one where he's talking about where the lady, I think it was a white lady, rinsed off cooking rice. So that's actually true. You're supposed to rinse off your rice before you cook it. But what you're supposed to do is rinse it while it's still raw. So you're not supposed to rinse cooked rice. I don't know why she did that. But when you rinse raw rice, essentially what's happening is when you rinse that rice down, what you're rinsing off is all of the excess starch. So that's super, super important before you cook the rice, because if you don't rinse it, the rice will stick together, and the excess starch with the rice is going to cause it to clump up into like really solid blocks. Which could be good in some cases, depending on like what you want to do with the rice. That might be useful, it might not be useful. Most of the time when we're eating Chinese food, we don't want that extra starch. So most of the time when you see Chinese people prepare rice, you'll see them. Usually what I'll do, I never cook the rice on stream because it takes too long to cook during the stream. But usually what I'll do is I'll throw my raw rice in a mesh strainer, and then I'll rinse it over the sink. And that just gets all of that extra starch off so it doesn't clump up. Otherwise, if you leave it on, it will clump up into big bricks, which actually makes it easier to eat with chopsticks. So if you have trouble with chopsticks, it might actually be to your benefit to cook your rice with that starch. But again, it all depends on like how you want to eat it. Cool. I always forget to eat these things. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I love wok fried eggs because they're so lacy and crispy, but also have that nice runny yolk, which combines really, really well with like the heaviness of the fried rice. So I love a good over easy wok fried egg because the yolk will run into the rice, and then you can kind of eat the rice with the yolk. So super, super tasty, and that kimchi gives us a nice contrast too. So. One of my favorite fried rices of all time is this kimchi fried rice. So, yeah, cool. All right, thanks everyone. I don't know, I might have missed some questions. I know I looked away and there's a lot of things that were happening in the chat. If I missed anything, feel free to repeat yourself. I know I miss stuff all the time. I'll be here cleaning up, so if I missed any questions, feel free and repeat yourself, and I'll be able to respond in the chat at the very least. If you haven't yet and you're watching on Reddit, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel and check out what's going on over there. We're working our way to 2,700 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit that subscriber goal, bop over and give it a subscribe. Don't subscribe if you're not interested. I don't know why people subscribe to the YouTube channel when they're not interested. Why are you doing that? We have lots of fun content coming up over there very soon. There's new recipes. Those are coming up every Friday. So this coming Friday, we're doing the Taiwanese popcorn chicken from Quickly, which is going to be really, really tasty. Friday after that, what's coming up after that? Chicken katsu. That's coming up in 2 Fridays. That's going to be really good. I just finished and uploaded the video for beef chow fun, which someone actually, I think Paul requested that over on YouTube. So I just finished that one up. That one's going to be in an homage to Shandong, which is going to be really, really tasty. So if you haven't checked out what's going on over on YouTube, lots of fun stuff coming up very, very soon. I like doing a lot of polls over on the YouTube channel too, so I like asking folks what they want me to cook next, and people give me good tips. So if you haven't checked that out, hop over and check out what's going on over there. We have a couple of series that are in progress right now, so there's this particular kimchi fried rice. Hey, Hamcharo is back. Cool. I'm sorry, I just got distracted, but I've been looking for Hamcharo for months, and finally he's back. This is Hamcharo. Hamcharo loves ramen. If you subscribe, he gets to eat ramen, but Hamcharo does not get to eat if you don't subscribe, so please feed Hamcharo. What was I saying? Yeah, so we're working our way to 2,700 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit that goal and feed Hamcharo, hop over and give it a subscribe. There's lots of fun stuff coming up soon. This particular recipe, it lives over on YouTube already. I think I did this one for gift recipes a while back, and it came up a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago. And I think I originally did the entire thing in a cast iron pan, so if you don't own a wok, this is a good one because you can do the whole thing in a cast iron pan. You're from the States, but you live in KSA. Your in-laws cook rice like you is like pasta in the drain. The basmati, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, similar ways to approaching pasta and rice because of the starch. So essentially, what's happening when you cook pasta is when you cook it, all of the starch from the pasta is shedding off in the water. So that's why people save pasta water so much, is because the pasta water contains all the starch. Rice has a very similar problem, is that the rice contains quite a bit of starch. So when you cook it, all of that excess water, it's going to contain all of that starch. So if you want that starch, it's very, very useful. It could be very useful. It probably is. I haven't made sushi rice in a while, but I would imagine it's probably pretty useful for sushi rice because it binds the rice together very nicely. I have not experimented with sushi rice in a while, so I might be wrong about that. Don't quote me. But yeah, again, it depends on how you want your rice to taste. Definitely, though, don't rinse cooked rice. I don't know why anyone would do that. It makes no sense. All right, cool. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you soon. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to be cooking something. I forget what we're cooking tomorrow. I want to say we're doing lion's head meatballs, but I feel like we just did lion's head meatballs. I think we're doing some kind of noodle dish tomorrow. I can't remember. But we'll be back doing something for dinner tomorrow. So if you haven't tuned in on Wednesdays, we'll be here on Wednesday at 6 o'clock p.m. PST. So I'll see you then. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you soon.
Slow. Come over and start up a conversation with just me, and trust me, I'll give it a chance. So now take my hand, stop and the man on the jukebox, and then we start to dance. And now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Well, come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me. Say, boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Well, come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. Last night you were in my room, and now my bedsheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. 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 Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. When we can, we let the story begin. We're going out on our first date. You and me are thrifty, so go all you can eat. Fill up your bag and I fill up a plate. We talk for hours and hours about the sweet and the sour and how your family's doing okay. And leaving, getting a taxi, kissing the backseat, tell the driver make the radio play. And I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me. Say, boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too. I'm in love with your body. Last night you were in my room, now my bedsheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. 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 Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. Come on, be my baby, come on. 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 little baby girl is in need. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Got another mouth to feed. Leave it with the babysitter, mama call the grave digger. Gone with the falling leaves. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might have had your fill, I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, I can feel it still. We can fight a war for peace. Give in to that easy living. Goodbye to my hopes and dreams. Stop flipping for my enemies. We could wait until the walls come down. It's time to give a little to the kids in the middle, but oh, until it falls, won't bother me. I'm a rebel just for kicks. Yeah, your lovers and a bitch for my heart to eclipse. Might be over now, I feel it still. I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, I can feel it still. Might have had your fill, I can feel it still.
Gọi là bạn anh, nhưng mà ít có bao giờ được nói cho mọi người biết đó là hiện tại của ta. Ngày nói cái đó cho tình